Bell P-39 Airacobra served as a ground attack aircraft for the United States Army Air Forces during World War II, proving highly effective at destroying low-level targets in the Pacific. Bell P-59 Aerocomet was the first jet aircraft built for the United States, primarily serving as a valuable training platform during World War II to prepare pilots for jet propulsion. Bell P-63 King Cobra was designed to improve upon earlier fighters, serving the United States military by flying critical pilot training and target missions throughout World War II. Boeing P-26P Shooter was an early monoplane fighter that saw limited defensive action for the United States in the Philippines during the opening stages of World War II combat. Brewster F-2A Buffalo served as a carrier-based fighter for the United States Navy in the early phase of World War II, participating in the critical defensive battle at Midway Island. Curtiss P-36 Hawk was a frontline fighter utilized by the United States military during the early days of World War II, defending Pearl Harbor against the initial surprise attacks. Curtiss P-40 Warhawk was a rugged fighter used extensively by the United States Army Air Forces across multiple theaters in World War II, excelling at low-altitude ground attack roles. Curtiss Wright CW-21 was a lightweight interceptor fighter that provided air defense support for United States allies in the Pacific Theater during the onset of World War II. Douglas P-70 Nighthawk served as the first dedicated night fighter for the United States Army Air Forces during World War II, utilizing early airborne radar to intercept enemy bombers. Grumman F-3F was a biplane fighter that served the United States Navy as a reliable pilot training platform during World War II after being retired from frontline carrier operations. Grumman F-4F Wildcat was the primary carrier-based fighter for the United States Navy during the early years of World War II, holding the line against enemy aircraft in the Pacific. Grumman F-6F Hellcat was a dominant carrier fighter for the United States Navy in World War II, achieving an outstanding kill ratio and securing total air supremacy over the Pacific. Grumman F-8F Bearcat was a high-performance carrier fighter designed for the United States Navy during World War II, arriving in the Pacific Theater just as the conflict ended. Lockheed P-38 Lightning was a twin-engine fighter used by the United States in all major theaters during World War II, excelling in high-altitude escort and reconnaissance. Lockheed F-5 Lightning was a specialized photo reconnaissance aircraft that provided vital aerial intelligence for the United States Military Command throughout World War II campaigns. North American P-51 Mustang was a legendary long-range escort fighter that allowed United States bombers to strike deep into enemy territory during the height of World War II. Northrop P-61 Black Widow was a powerful radar-equipped night fighter developed for the United States Army Air Forces to destroy enemy aircraft in total darkness during World War II. Republic P-35 was an early monoplane fighter that saw operational defensive action for the United States Army Air Forces in the Far East during the initial months of World War II. Republic P-43 Lancer was a high-altitude fighter that served the United States military by conducting high-altitude photo reconnaissance operations during the first half of World War II. Republic P-47 Thunderbolt was a heavily armed fighter that served the United States Army Air Forces as an exceptionally durable ground attack platform in World War II. Ryan FR Fireball was a unique mixed propulsion fighter operating with both piston and jet engines for the United States Navy, entering limited service near the close of World War II. Vought F-4U Corsair was a powerful inverted gull-wing fighter that served the United States Navy and Marine Corps with great distinction across the Pacific Theater in World War II. Vultee P-66 Vanguard was a fighter aircraft utilized by the United States military for regional air defense and advanced fighter pilot training throughout the years of World War II. Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress was a legendary heavy bomber that formed the backbone of the United States strategic daylight bombing campaign over Europe throughout World War II. Boeing B-29 Superfortress was a massive heavy bomber used by the United States to conduct long-range strategic bombing missions against the enemy mainland during World War II. Brewster SB-2A Buccaneer was a scout bomber utilized by the United States Navy for operational training duties and target towing assignments across the domestic front in World War II. Consolidated B-24 Liberator was a long-range heavy bomber produced in massive numbers for the United States, serving globally in bombing and anti-submarine roles in World War II. Consolidated B-32 Dominator was a heavy bomber that saw limited operational combat service with the United States Army Air Forces in the Pacific Theater at the close of World War II. Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver was a carrier-based dive bomber that provided heavy close air support for United States Navy fleet operations across the Pacific Theater during World War II. Douglas A-20 Havoc was a versatile light bomber and attack aircraft that served the United States Army Air Forces well in both low-level bombing and night fighting in World War II. Douglas A-24 Banshee was the Army variant of a famous dive bomber, serving the United States Army Air Forces in early Pacific ground attack missions throughout World War II. Douglas A-26 Invader was a fast, twin-engine attack bomber that provided devastating low-level strafing and bombing capabilities for the United States late in World War II. Douglas B-18 Bolo was an early bomber that served the United States military primarily by flying critical anti-submarine patrols along the coastlines during the start of World War II. Douglas B-23 Dragon was a twin-engine bomber utilized by the United States military for coastal patrol duties and utility transport roles during the first phase of World War II. Douglas BTD Destroyer was a carrier-based torpedo bomber that entered limited operational evaluation service with the United States Navy during the final months of World War II combat. Douglas TBD Devastator was the primary torpedo bomber for the United States Navy during the opening months of World War II, participating in the legendary carrier battle at Midway. Douglas A-33 was an attack bomber utilized by the United States military for operational training and domestic coastal patrol flights during the initial years of World War II. Grumman TBF Avenger was a highly effective carrier-based torpedo bomber that served the United States Navy across every major maritime fleet engagement throughout all of World War II. Lockheed A-28 Hudson was a twin-engine patrol bomber that provided essential maritime reconnaissance and anti-submarine defense for United States coastal areas in World War II. Lockheed Ventura was a powerful twin-engine patrol bomber utilized by the United States military to hunt enemy submarines and protect vital shipping lanes throughout World War II. Martin B-10 was an early monoplane bomber that remained in active service for the United States, flying critical coastal patrols in the overseas territories during World War II campaigns. Martin B-26 Marauder was a fast medium bomber that achieved an exceptionally low loss rate while flying tactical bombing missions for the United States forces in World War II. Martin A-22 Maryland was a light bomber utilized by the United States military for essential operational training and aerial mapping missions during the course of World War II. Martin A-30 Baltimore was an attack bomber built in America that provided vital tactical bombing and reconnaissance support for United States global allies throughout World War II. North American A-36 Apache was a dive bomber variant of a famous fighter serving the United States Army Air Forces in the Mediterranean theater during the middle of World War II. North American B-25 Mitchell was a highly versatile medium bomber used by the United States across all combat zones, famously launching the historic raid on Tokyo in World War II. North American A-27 was an attack aircraft utilized by the United States military for advanced pilot training and regional defensive operations during the years of World War II. Northrop A-17 was a light attack bomber that served the United States military by flying domestic coastal patrols and advanced training missions during the start of World War II. Northrop BT was a dive bomber that served the United States Navy by providing valuable pilot training and utility flight support during the initial operational period of World War II. Vought SB-2U Vindicator was an early carrier dive bomber that saw defensive combat action with the United States Marine Corps during the pivotal Battle of Midway in World War II. Vultee A-31 Vengeance was a dedicated dive bomber utilized by the United States military for operational crew training and target towing missions during the years of World War II. Consolidated PBY Catalina was a legendary flying boat that served the United States Navy by performing long-range maritime patrol, anti-submarine warfare, and rescue in World War II. Consolidated PB-2Y Coronado was a massive four-engine flying boat used by the United States Navy for long-range maritime patrol and heavy cargo transport missions in World War II. Consolidated PB-4Y2 Privateer was a long-range patrol bomber that conducted maritime reconnaissance and anti-shipping strikes for the United States Navy during World War II. Curtiss SC Seahawk was a sleek float plane launched from warships to perform scout and rescue missions for the United States Navy during the final surface campaigns of World War II. Curtiss SO-3C Seamew was a float plane used by the United States Navy for catapult-launched observation and maritime scouting duties around coastal waters during World War II. Curtiss SOC Seagull was a durable biplane float plane that served the United States Navy aboard battleships and cruisers for observation and scouting roles throughout World War II. Douglas R&D Dolphin was a versatile amphibian flying boat utilized by the United States military for coastal search and rescue and essential utility transport flights during World War II. Douglas P-2D was a maritime patrol aircraft that served the United States Navy by flying coastal reconnaissance and operational training missions during the phase of World War II. Grumman J-2F Duck was a rugged biplane amphibian that performed essential air-sea rescue, scouting and utility transport missions for the United States Navy during World War II. Grumman J-4F Widgeon was a light amphibian flying boat used by the United States military for coastal anti-submarine patrol and light utility transport throughout World War II. Grumman JRF Goose was a highly reliable transport and utility amphibian flying boat that served the United States Navy and Coast Guard on coastal patrol duties during World War II. Hall PH was a large biplane flying boat that served the United States Coast Guard by conducting long-range maritime search and rescue missions along the coastlines in World War II. Martin PBM Mariner was a twin-engine flying boat that provided extensive long-range maritime patrol, anti-submarine warfare, and rescue support for the United States in World War II. Martin JRM Mars was a gigantic flying boat transport that entered operational cargo service with the United States Navy, carrying massive payloads across the Pacific in World War II. Naval Aircraft Factory PBN Nomad was a modified patrol flying boat that performed long-range maritime scouting and anti-submarine duties for the United States Navy in World War II. Sikorsky JRS-1 was an amphibious flying boat that served the United States Navy by flying critical search and photographic reconnaissance missions during the start of World War II. Vought OS-2U Kingfisher was a catapult-launched float plane that performed vital observation and anti-submarine duties for the United States Navy fleet throughout World War II campaigns. Beechcraft C-45 Expeditor was a twin-engine light transport that provided reliable staff transport and multi-engine pilot training for the United States in World War II campaigns. Boeing 314 Clipper was a long-range flying boat transport drafted by the United States military to carry high-ranking officials across oceans during World War II campaigns. But RMB-1 Conestoga was an innovative stainless steel cargo transport that served the United States Navy by moving critical military freight both domestically and late in World War II. Curtiss C-46 Commando was a powerful transport aircraft used by the United States to fly hazardous cargo missions over the Himalayan mountains to China throughout World War II. Douglas C-33 was an early twin-engine transport that provided vital cargo and personnel movement capabilities for the United States military during the onset of World War II. Douglas C-39 was a reliable twin-engine transport aircraft that moved essential military cargo and personnel across domestic networks for the United States in World War II. Douglas C-47 Skytrain was the primary tactical transport aircraft of the United States, dropping thousands of paratroopers and moving vital cargo throughout World War II. Douglas C-49 was a commercial airliner pressed into service by the United States military to carry out critical domestic cargo and troop transport duties during World War II. Douglas C-53 Skytrooper was a dedicated troop transport variant used extensively by the United States to deploy airborne forces and tow tactical gliders throughout World War II. Douglas C-54 Skymaster was a long-range four-engine transport that formed the vital backbone of the United States transoceanic military airlift network during World War II. Douglas C-74 Globemaster was a massive long-range heavy transport developed for the United States military, entering initial operational test flight service in World War II. Fairchild C-61 Argus was a light utility transport used by the United States military to carry personnel and light freight between bases throughout the years of World War II. Fairchild C-82 Packet was a twin-boom cargo transport designed for the United States military. entering initial operational test service near the very end of World War II. Howard GH was a high-performance cabin monoplane utilized by the United States Navy as a fast light transport and vital air ambulance for wounded personnel throughout World War II. Leyster-Kaufman TG-4 was a specialized training glider used by the United States Army Air Forces to instruct pilots in the art of silent tactical glider assault in World War II. Lockheed C-56 Lodestar was a fast twin-engine transport utilized by the United States military to move high-ranking officers and urgent cargo during the years of World War II. Lockheed C-69 Constellation was a fast four-engine transport that entered service with the United States military to carry out long-range high-altitude airlift in World War II. Lockheed Electra was a twin-engine light transport utilized by the United States military to conduct essential utility transport and administrative flight duties during World War II. Lockheed Vega was a classic cabin airplane utilized by the United States military to conduct light utility transport and administrative courier missions all throughout World War II. Nordine C-64 Norseman was a rugged utility transport aircraft used by the United States to move personnel and cargo into remote, unpaved airfields all throughout World War II. Schweitzer TG-2 was a reliable training glider utilized by the United States military to establish the fundamental flying skills required for tactical glider pilots in World War II. Stinson Reliant was a rugged high-wing monoplane used by the United States military for light utility transport, instrument flight training, and coastal patrol work in World War II. Waco CG-4A was the primary tactical combat glider for the United States military, carrying airborne troops and heavy equipment directly into enemy territory during World War II. Waco CG-13 was a large tactical troop glider used by the United States military to transport heavy military payloads and combat infantry squads into combat zones in World War II. Waco C-72 was a light cabin aircraft drafted into service by the United States military to perform essential utility transport and courier duties throughout World War II. Waco C-73 was a light utility transport plane utilized by the United States military to perform administrative flights and light cargo movements all throughout World War II. Beechcraft AT-7 Navigator was a specialized twin-engine aircraft used by the United States to train thousands of celestial and radar flight navigators during World War II campaigns. Beechcraft AT-10 Wichita was an all-wood twin-engine trainer used by the United States Army Air Forces to prepare advanced pilots for multi-engine heavy bombers during World War II. Beechcraft AT-11 Kansan was the standard twin-engine bombardier and gunnery trainer utilized by the United States Army Air Forces to train flight crews all throughout World War II. Boeing Stearman PT-17 Cadet was the iconic primary biplane trainer used by the United States military to instruct tens of thousands of student fighter pilots during World War II. Cessna AT-17 Bobcat was a widely used twin-engine advanced trainer that prepared thousands of United States Army Air Forces pilots for heavy tactical bomber duty in World War II. Cessna C-165 Airmaster was a high-wing monoplane used by the United States military for light utility transport and administrative flight tasks throughout World War II. Curtiss-Wright AT-9 was a demanding twin-engine advanced trainer used by the United States to prepare fighter and bomber pilots for high-performance aircraft in World War II. Fairchild PT-19 Cornell was a primary monoplane trainer that served the United States military by introducing thousands of cadet pilots to fundamental flight in World War II. Fleetwing's BT-12 Sophomore was an all-metal basic trainer constructed from stainless steel that saw active instructional flight service for the United States during World War II. North American AT-6 Texan was an exceptionally popular advanced trainer used by the United States to teach combat tactics, gunnery, and instrument flight roles during World War II. North American BT-9 was a basic trainer aircraft that served the United States military by providing essential intermediate flight instruction to rookie pilots during World War II. Ryan PT-22 Recruit was a low-wing primary trainer used by the United States Army Air Forces to teach basic flight maneuvers to incoming aviation cadets during World War II. Tim N2T Tutor was a plastic bonded plywood primary trainer used by the United States Navy to evaluate and instruct student naval aviators all throughout the years of World War II. Vultee BT-13 Valiant was the most widely used basic flight trainer in the United States military, preparing thousands of student pilots for advanced combat flight in World War II. Aeronca L-3 Grasshopper was a light observation plane used by the United States military for low-altitude artillery spotting and liaison duties over World War II battlefields. Interstate L-6 Grasshopper was a light cabin observation plane utilized by the United States military for coastal anti-submarine patrol and domestic crew training roles during World War II. North American O-47 was an observation monoplane utilized by the United States military for coastal anti-submarine patrol and domestic crew training roles during World War II. Douglas O-38 was a biplane observation aircraft used by the United States military for liaison duties and regional mapping missions during the first phase of World War II. Douglas O-46 was a high-wing observation monoplane utilized by the United States military for coastal patrol duties and operational training missions all throughout World War II. Piper J-3 Cub served as a light liaison plane for the United States military, providing essential low-level observation and courier flight support all throughout World War II. Stinson L-5 Sentinel was a versatile liaison plane used by the United States military for forward artillery spotting, medical evacuation, and communications during World War II. Stinson O-49 Vigilant was a high-wing observation aircraft used by the United States military for low-speed artillery spotting and critical liaison missions during World War II. Taylorcraft L-2 Grasshopper was a light observation aircraft used by the United States military for direct artillery spotting and frontline courier duties all throughout World War II.